Well, we're going to look back 10 years this afternoon. We're going to go back to 1991, Desert Shield, which turned into Desert Storm, and we're going to talk to two of the gentlemen from our area who served with such distinction in that action. They're from Bravo Company, United States Marine Corps Reserve Unit here in Yakima. And one of the gentlemen here, Brian Winter, I should say Major Winter, is a Yakima County Sheriff's Deputy, and he's responsible for the Lower Yakima Valley. And Al Pinero, who works for the Immigration and Naturalization Service, is also a vet of Desert Storm. Pineda, I'm sorry. Why did I say Pinero? I'm thinking of Joel Pinero, plays for the Mariners. Pardon me, Al. I'm sorry about that. That's what I'm thinking about. But anyway, we have these gentlemen here with us today. It was on the 25th of February, 1991, that the Bravo Company Reserve Unit involved in a major engagement as part of Operation Desert Storm, where they engaged Iraqi tanks and Iraqi troops and came out pretty much without a scratch. And a lot of people had questions about reserve units going into combat like that with limited training, so forth and so on. But I tell you guys, you did all of us very proud, and we're happy to have you with us on the program today. Thank you very much for coming in. We really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
Got to do more than nod, guys. Sorry about that. Got to do more than nod. Well, anyway, does it seem like 10 years has passed since you guys were involved in that action?
Well, actually, time goes by so fast, and I've been so busy in with my employment that, as you well know, we were reservists, and you made it a point of that that was our primary bread and butter. So with the experience and all, it's quick to come to the forefront in terms of what we did out there and how our involvement. But it doesn't seem like 10 years, no.
Wow. No, it doesn't. When you look back, it doesn't seem like 10 years, but a lot of time has passed, and of course, Saddam Hussein in the news again with the United States and British planes last week, with attacking anti-aircraft positions in violation of the no-fly zone, and they're doing it again. So you have to wonder, 10 years later, still things still the same, But I think what people forget is you guys and the rest of the coalition forces met your objective. And that was to drive the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and that was your job. A lot of people said, "Why didn't you go all the way to Baghdad?" But that wasn't your job, was it?
No, and actually we were prevented from doing that, and it was frustrating. But we do what we're told, and so we held at the 6-Wing Motorway there in Kuwait City.
So there you did it, and you. I was thinking about the story about you guys in the Yakima Herald Republic a few weeks ago, and actually that gave me the idea to have you come in and talk to our listeners this afternoon. Being bivouacked at the pet cemetery, you called it, and that must have been quite an experience. And why don't you explain a little bit what that was, Brian?
The pet cemetery was an area in Kuwait City where we had pushed a berm up around us, partly to keep the Kuwaitis out and partly to keep the Marines in. It was a very interesting time and a very interesting area, but we still weren't completely out of being in a dangerous area there. So that was kind of home for about, 2 or 3 weeks before we moved back down to Al-Mashab and then by boat back down to Al-Jabail.
So why do they call it the pet cemetery?
Well, that particular area in Kuwait City, a lot of animals had been buried there. Not only zoo animals had either escaped or had been let free and had been killed or had died. A lot of carcasses of a lot of strange animals in that particular area.
Wow, great place to bivouac, huh?
Well, we didn't have a whole lot to choose from.
Didn't get to choose. Let's go back to the beginning. You guys, United States Marine Corps reservists in 1990 and 1991. Tell us about the call up. You didn't have a lot of time, did you?
Well, I don't think there were many options, but even though there was I believe we recognized it was coming. It was on the in terms of the news, the reservists being called up and the potential of using all the resources available in the armed forces. So, I think everybody was in the right frame of mind, I believe, and we accepted it. It was tough on the families. I think it was tough on the communities to some extent.
But you're in the reserve. That's what you were training for.
When you sign up, there's that commitment. There's everybody joins for a certain reason, but when you stay with that commitment that you will be available, it was very true of Bravo Company. Every individual, wasn't a single individual that was questioned or any reason to delay them arriving. They came when they were called, and we went to where we were told we were going to go.
And of course, Brian, you're still very much involved, aren't you?
Yes, I'm back involved with B Company, have been for the last year again, in the peacetime, wartime support team function, which is a two-man unit attached to Bravo Company that does community outreach and public affairs during peacetime, and then we would be running the reserve center if the company was called up to go off to war again.
All right, let's give the phone numbers. If you have a question for either of our guests this afternoon, numbers are 972-5481, pound KIT on U.S. Cellular, and then pound 123 on AT&T Wireless, and the free calls or cell calls anywhere in Yakima County. Our guest, Al Pineda and Brian Winter, and they are Gulf War vets. They're from Bravo Company, who saw action in Operation Desert Storm. Hi, you're on KIT. Thank you for calling this afternoon.
Hi, Brian. At the time, I was surprised that they were calling up reserves. I always had the idea the reserves are like after the entire rest of the Army has been wiped out and then the reserves go in. But it was a surprise to me that they were calling up reservists for this action 10 years ago. Was that a surprise to the reservists, or did they always expect that this could happen under those circumstances?
I think that very much depends on the nature of the particular conflict that we're talking about, and the nature of this particular one was going to be probably desert warfare. It was going to involve tanks. For the Marine Corps at that time, we only had 5 tank battalions, and today we are now down to 4, 2 in the active forces and 2 in the reserve forces. So you don't have to get very deep into Marine Corps tank ability before the reserves are involved. So I think that was probably the primary reason why we were involved so early in that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Hi, you're on KIT. Good afternoon.
Hi, I was wondering if they had any comments about the fellows that came home and didn't feel well shortly after they got back from being over there, if they had any comment on that.
Well, I know that there have been several people in Bravo Company that have had what we believe to be related problems, some of what we know to be related problems, everything from delayed stress syndrome to physical ailments. We were very fortunate. There was only one Marine that was wounded while we were over there. But we have had some folks. That time was very trying. It was much easier for me, I think, as a tank commander to give an order to fire, knowing that ended up in the destruction of vehicles and people dying. Sometimes it's a little more difficult for the person who's actually pulling the trigger, and you have to deal with that in your own way. That's a very personal thing, and each person, I think, deals with that differently. So we did have a little bit of a lot of stress showed up afterwards in a lot of different ways, and then we have had some people end up varying levels of disability. I wouldn't say a very large percentage of the company, but we have had a few that are still dealing with things that happened 10 years ago.
Do you guys believe that there were chemicals released over there, or is it hard to say, or
It's difficult for us to know. We did hear radio traffic about chemical mines as we were going through the minefields. We just don't know, and I think that's one of the reasons I am subscribed to a mailing list called Gulf Link, where I get updates via email on what's going on and what information has been released from the Gulf War. The chemicals that they talk about that supposedly caused some of the problems are some of the pre-treatment tablets that we were taking over there. So I think that has yet to be determined. However, at the time, we did not see any direct, that I know of, we did not see any direct evidence of chemical warfare.
Sure. Well, thank you guys for your support. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, 972-5481, pound KIT on U.S. Cellular, and then pound 123 on AT&T Wireless. If you have a question for Al Pineda or Brian Winter, they're both Gulf War vets. They're from Bravo Company right here in town. And the 10th anniversary of their major engagement coming up on February 25th. Hi, you're on KIT. Thank you for calling.
Yes, I'd like to know if the tank that's at the Reserve Center is actually one that Bravo Company captured or just a generic one that was provided.
That's actually a tank that I'll put the word captured in quotes, I think. we didn't actually fight that tank. It was a T-72 that we found there in Kuwait City. We had put the word out that we were looking for a T-72 in good condition, and one of the lieutenants in 1st Battalion, 8th Marines came up to me one day and told me he knew where there was a tank, and we went and took a look at it. It was fully loaded with ammunition, everything from main gun to hand grenades, and we had to clear it first, and then we kind of drug it back to our position and dared anybody to take it away from us.
Is that the Iraqi main battle tank?
Yes, sir. That's a T-72. It's either a Bravo or a Golf model. We've really never been sure about that. We'd kind of like for it to be a Bravo model for personal reasons, but it is a T-72. It was made in the Soviet Union, and our guess is, the best guess that we've got is that some of the damage that's on the tank may have occurred, for example, during the Iraq-Iran war, maybe sometime earlier. But it was pretty much a hangar queen by the time we found it. The 50 caliber tank commander's machine gun had been fired so much that the barrel had bent. So we went about 50 yards away and found another, dropped it in, and drug it back to our position.
Okay, thank you much.
All right, thank you. And that's another story about how that got home too, because that's a story in itself, isn't it? How it got here.
It really is. Without the community and the community participation and support that we had, that tank would have never made it back to Yakima. And we'd specifically like to thank Nick Temple again and the folks here in the community who helped get that pad poured, cement pad there at the Reserve Center. Mid-State Monuments for the monument, the black marble slab that sits next to it, and J.M. Perry for working on that tank. They painted it, made some mock-ups of parts that were missing. So it was we really closely identified with the community at that time, and we want to keep that going.
All right. Hi, you're on KIT. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Brian. I'd like to thank these guys, plus all of the other fellows that were in the Bravo Company for what they did. I was fortunate to have someone come back that I knew very well. He was one of my former students. I'm a retired school teacher, and he came and talked to us and shared that particular incident. And I think you guys really do downplay it, because from what he said, it was a whole lot hairier than what we back here truly knew. And also, I'd like to ask, I heard after you guys got back that had the Iraqis really knew what they were doing with those tanks, it would have been tougher for you guys to do what you did. Do you know anything about that? And I will listen to your response off the air.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. I'd like to add something to that. I think she's absolutely correct. Whoever she's spoken to, we went through so many situations where you could actually see the arsenal. I think that things could have been a little bit different. I don't think the outcome would have been different, but I think situations could have been different, and then more people hurt. It certainly would have been our loved ones, our fellow Marines there. But there was a large amount of arsenal. They could have dug in. They could have held. And I think the difference is, like this lady just called in, the callers, which I appreciate, is, the big difference was, I think, the esprit de corps, as well as knowing that the support was from the area, and everybody wants to go home. And the difference was that we were aggressive in everything we did, and I think that there was really no force out there, and we thank God that we had that support. That I don't think there was anything out there that could have stood up to what was coming. Bravo Company and the entire armed forces and all the allies, but there was a lot of arsenal. Everywhere we went, we saw all kinds of weapons that some people could have been hurt had they had more spirit.
Now let me ask you this. You mentioned the esprit de corps. How were you guys treated by regular Marines? I mean, were you treated as equals by the regulars?
There is always a little bit of rivalry between reserve forces and regular forces, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we got over there, and it was our job to, just as any new kid on the block, to show the unit that we were attached to, which was 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, and also we were with 2nd Tanks initially, 2nd Tank Battalion, to show them that we were capable of doing the job that was expected of us. And I think when it's all boiled down and you get right down to the nitty-gritty, there were some people who thought that we had been thrown in at the pointy end of the spear because we were cannon fodder, and then there were other people who said that we had been thrown in because we were absolutely the best thing that the Marine Corps had. And I would say that neither one of those is true. From the Marine Corps' point of view, we were simply another Marine Corps tank company, and we were expected to do the job.
All right, let's take another call, then we have to take a break. Hi, you're on KIT. Thank you for calling.
Hi, I was just wondering if they could elaborate on how their families, their loved ones handled it while they were preparing to leave and while they were gone, and how it was when they came back.
It's difficult now. I feel, to some extent right now, the leaving, in my case, 5 kids, but I also had a lot of young men that were in situations where, just girlfriends, their loved ones. And so aside from dealing with your own personal situation, in our case, Brian to myself, is that, we had to provide the leadership and the support. And luckily we had the support after we left. We had some of the wives that took the bull by the horns, if you will, so to speak. And we had, again, the support of the community that was there to provide the support. But, Brian, you probably have more to add. I know your wife was very involved in this situation, as was First Sergeant Bob Martins, and that's Liz Martin was also very involved.
Actually, that part of the Marine Corps has been very much reinforced since Desert Storm, and that's the importance of what we call the Key Volunteer Network within the Marine Corps. And that's not just a reserve function. It's the support function that is in place once a unit is deployed. And for it to be in place by that time, of course, you have to set it up and have it functioning before that time. And so I was correct. At that time, my wife was involved as the equivalent of a key volunteer wife. She was a coordinator and helped work with different wives and their girlfriends and mothers and fathers and the problems and the questions that came up. She worked closely with the INI, the inspector, instructor, active duty staff there at the Reserve Center. And that very much is a factor because with the reserve unit, being called up is such a rare event that it really took a lot of families, a lot of people by surprise.
Right.
One more thing is that, the individuals stayed behind from the INI, they're there for a reason. They didn't stay behind, I thought. They were a direct link back to the community. And with First Sergeant Bob Martin providing communication to them, I believe, being that next to having your loved one there, that communication and I think with the mechanism being put in place now is more for future situations. But I thought it was very supportive.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, and we're very proud of you guys.
News Talk Radio, KIT. Thanks for joining us today on Talkline. We're talking with Brian Winter and Alfie Neda today, and they are Desert Storm vets from Bravo Company right here in Yakima. It was 10 years ago Sunday that Bravo Company faced the Iraqi military in their major engagement, came out with only 1 wounded Marine, and, of course, were very, very effective in Operation Desert Storm. 972-5481, pound KIT on U.S. Cellular, then pound 123 on AT&T Wireless if you have a question for our guest today. During the break, we were talking a little bit about training and how your training was compressed so much and basically started out with 1 tank and ended up with the United States military's main battle tank. So let's talk a little bit about that. It was, how many weeks should it have been?
Normally that they call it a new equipment training team, and you go through a NET process, and normally that takes about 7 weeks. That training was compressed in our case into about 2.5 weeks.
Wow!
Because of the time constraints.
Wow. And you started out on one kind of tank, then went to the M1A.
Right. The Marine Corps at that time was equipped with the M60A1 tank, which was a 105 millimeter tank, and transitioned to the M1A1, which was the upcoming Armed Forces standard. Was a heavy tank, a main battle tank, about 68 tons, 120 millimeter main gun, very, very capable tank, very technical tank, very complicated tank. And one of the things that we asked for additional training in was if all these fancy systems went down and you were left with just the basic systems, we wanted to be able to effectively fight that tank with all the fancy systems down. And then the more of those fancy systems that were up and operational, then that was just frosting on the cake.
Al, you had an interesting comment there during the break. You said that, as a reservist, you weren't a tanker, but you became a tanker.
I was made a tanker, but I didn't object. Actually, it was quite an honor to work with a different unit, but they were so cohesive, as Brian was indicating, the training 2.5 weeks. the state of mind is what's most important. They'll absorb the training, and we did. I more than anybody else, and I had been not been trained in tanks before, either the old version or the new transition 1T and 1A. It was quite a challenge, and it was something that worked out very well for me.
During the break, you guys were reminiscing a little bit and talking about things. Brian, you were telling me that a lot of people back home had a concept of maybe that the Iraqis just gave up. You know, they faced with the United States and the coalition forces just gave up. But something happened to you that brought it into real good perspective that no, they didn't give up.
Well, during what they ended up calling the Reveille engagement, which was the second morning of the ground war, we had ended up ambushing this T-72 battalion. And we were, of course, down to 13 tanks at that point, having lost one tank during the breach of the first minefield. So we were in a coil formation, and these tanks started coming south out of Kuwait City along a hard surface road, and we ended up engaging them at ranges of from about 16 or 1700 meters out to about 2800 meters. And let there be no doubt in anybody's mind that we were taking some incoming fire from these tanks. Now, this was an armor ambush, an impromptu armor ambush, because we really hadn't planned this. We weren't there waiting for these tanks. We had stopped where we had been told to stop, and these tanks were coming down this road to try to break through our lines and do as much damage as they could before they were taken out or taken captive. And so I thank God that we were in that particular location, because we did what we had been trained to do, and we came out of the coil, went online, and started shooting tanks just as fast as we could. I took one thing that really caught my attention, and like you said, really focused me, was my head kind of jerked at one point, and I saw a trough or a furrow in the sand between me and the tank to my right. And I realized that what that meant was that one of those tanks out there had fired probably a Sabo round, and that round had missed. I don't know to this day whether they were firing at my tank or the tank to my right, but I knew they were firing at us, and that really focused us on our fire command's or gunner Sabo tank. And there was one particular tank that we were shooting at that point, and that was the tank that had just fired at us.
Wow.
So this was not a situation where they were just gallivanting down the road and weren't shooting at us. They were the tanks that were engaged initially were the tanks that were trying to get into an offensive position or were trying to return fire. The T-72, the main gun has to raise when they're loading the main gun. And so when we saw that happening, we knew what was going on inside the turret, and we would engage those tanks and the tanks that were turning toward us first.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. When you got the call, move out, we're going, did you have time to think about it, or did just training take over and that was it? Or did you have time to think about it?
Actually, the way that we woke up that morning, or the way that the whole unit came to know that there was a problem that morning, was Captain Hart, the second platoon commander, had one of his crewmen come to him and tell him that they needed him to look at some thermal signatures they were picking up on the tank's thermal. And so he took one look and identified that upside-down skillet shape of the T-72, and at the top of his lungs yelled, "Tanks, tanks, bad guy tanks." And that was the sound. The next sound I heard was his turbine coming to life, and it was almost immediately followed as the rest of us literally fell into our turret positions and started the tanks and came online. And my initial concern, the first thing that I had to make sure as the company XO, was I had to make sure that these were not friendly tanks. And so I spent just long enough to confirm in my sights that these were not M60s that had gotten lost or that were coming from an unexpected direction. They were indeed T-72s, and pretty promptly there were about 13 main gun tubes engaging Iraqi tanks.
Wow. So not a lot of time to think.
No. And if there's such a thing as a cyclic rate for a tank, we were pretty close to it.
I think the superiority of the training of the Marines in our company just really came up. So did the equipment. You remember how cloudy it was. I mean how blurred it was. And I don't know. I think most people out there realize that 1,600 meters the mile. And the range in which we're shooting. It's but the thermal, again, the equipment and superiority of the Marines in responding. We said readily, basically just about everybody except those on watch were asleep. So responding to on a moment's notice with alert and to react. I think it's just really very impressive, even for those out there.
How long does this last? I mean, it must have seemed like a long time. How long did the engagement last?
I believe the entire engagement lasted about 20 minutes, and I believe we dispatched about 2/3 of that column in the first 90 seconds.
Wow. It's just unbelievable. Like I was telling you before, I have no concept of that, what it's like to be in combat. Most people don't. Vets do. Vietnam vets, World War II, Korea vets, Desert Storm vets, know what that's like. But I would say that most of the people in our audience have no concept of what that's like. And you're also talking about when you got over there, you wondered about how you were going to be in that, you could have gone as individual replacements or platoon replacements or so forth, but actually the best possible scenario happened, and you got to stay together as a unit.
And that was outstanding. We had only hoped that would happen. There are many different scenarios. We would have gone over there with a rifle if that's what we'd been told to do. But here we were going over as a tank company to fight as a tank company. We were a replacement for an active duty tank company that was out on ship, one of the tank companies that was part of the amphibious feint that drew Saddam over toward the coast. And so the 2nd Tank Battalion was the only Marine tank battalion that was at that time going to be equipped with the M1A1. And so we became the replacement tank company for 2nd Tanks.
But a lot of people might forget how that worked. There were a lot of ships, so forth and so on, to make it look like an amphibious assault to come on the beaches of Kuwait, but that was a fake. That was the whole part of it.
And very effective.
All right, if you have a question for either of our guests today, members of Bravo Company, Brian Winter, Al Pineda, give us a call this afternoon. We have about 15 minutes left in the program. 972-5481, pound KIT on U.S. Cellular, and then pound 123 on AT&T Wireless. And once again, the cell calls are free calls. 10 years ago Sunday, the Reveille engagement, as they were talking about where Bravo Company engaged the Iraqi military, and like Brian said, about 20 minutes or so, and basically took out most of their opponents in the first 90 seconds of the engagement. So if you have a question for them, why don't you give us a call this afternoon on KIT. Hi, you're on KIT. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Russ, Tom, and Hurd. I remember that your guys were on there tonight. I didn't hear the names. What are they?
Brian Winter and Al Pineda.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, I only wanted to call in, not with a question, but I wanted to say on behalf of me and my family and everybody, thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. We, as United States Marines, we expect to be involved if there's a fight someplace. And in this particular case, we're very glad that it worked out the way it did, and we are exceptionally happy about the relationship between the community, the many communities where these Marines came from, and in fact all the members of the armed forces that fought over there. And we really appreciate and could never say thank you enough to all the people in this community for their support and their the way that they kept us in their hearts and minds while we were gone.
Well, I've got to tell you, I followed with special interest you guys over there. My oldest son wants to be a Marine. He was very much into his going to be, I should say. And I couldn't be prouder.
Well, thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your call. It means a lot, and I think that's part of what we were talking here earlier, is that, individually and as groups and as community, it really means a lot. I think that everybody here should know that we've done it for ourselves, but also for those that are home, and I hope we'll do some justice to our fellow Marines, and certainly for the community we appreciate.
Well, I'm glad everybody made it home all right, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for calling. Good afternoon. You're on KIT. Hello.
Hello, I had to turn my radio off.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to tell you guys, I had a little different perspective here. I was a platoon commander for a rifle infantry company in the National Guard here when you guys went over. And it was a training eye-opener for my troops to see that this is a possibility. And it was an eye-opening for me to sit and watch and wonder if we were going to get the call. We were attached to the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea, so our mission we stayed in the States. We did not end up going over there. But I also wanted to salute you and appreciate the effort that you guys did. And it was I kind of have a little bit of an understanding, being that I was kind of training for the same kind of a mission.
Absolutely, and I'd like to reaffirm, I think, something that Al said earlier. the people who stayed in the States because that was their mission and that was their duty at the time served every bit as much as the people whose duty it was to be deployed and to fight over there. And we've never made a conscious distinction between the folks that went over and fought or those that served in support capacities or those that stayed here in the States, because we're all part of a big machine that functioned like it was supposed to. We did our job. We can't do anything about the political decisions that were made. That's not our place. But we did the jobs, including you and your men, and we'd also like to thank you for your service to this country.
And keep training. It may pay off one of these days. I can't overemphasize that.
Well, I'm no longer active in it, but I sure appreciate you guys' efforts, and I know that it was a hard thing to do, and my wife didn't like me being a CNN junkie all night long watching what was going on. But
I think we all were. Don't worry about it.
But it was. It also did us as a guardsman. It was very also gratifying to know that we can be a weekend warrior, and when the call comes, to know that we can do the job. And
that's right.
You guys showed that, and it was I'm not a Marine. I'm a Army officer, but it was still. I'm still a reservist and a guardsman, and it was still gratifying to know that we can hold our heads up to everybody else.
And
that was really good.
We all fight for the same flag.
Yeah, we're all part of the big green machine.
Absolutely.
Cool, guys.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon. You're on KIT. Hello.
Hi. I actually knew Brian back before Desert Storm, so this is kind of cool to hear you on the radio. But I had a question. I was listening to, I think it was Michael Reagan, probably about a month ago, and I heard something about reserves being in line to go to Bosnia, and that basically that our armed forces were now counting on our reserves to hold key positions in not necessarily what I would consider immediate need type areas, and I wondered what these guys might have heard.
Well, I think one of the things that we're going to have to wait and see is what our Chief is going to do, what his attitude toward the deployment of American troops on foreign soil is, because with him as the Commander-in-Chief, I think that we might find a little bit different deployment policy in place here shortly. And I also I think we need to realize that as we have decreased the number of people in uniform, the reserve in each branch of the service has become more and more important and not less important, because, for example, in the Marine Corps Reserve provides not just breadth but depth to our capability, or excuse me, not just depth. In other words, we don't just provide more of functions that are already in place in the active duty forces, but the reserve actually provides some unique abilities that are only found in the reserve.
Great. Well, you guys definitely fulfilled your jobs with honor, and I thank you. I personally hope that it's not necessary to use reserves overseas and non-immediate situations, but if it is, I'm sure that you'll do a great job.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We need to take a break. We'll come back in just a moment. We're talking to Brian Winter and Al Pineda. We're talking about Bravo Company 10 years ago, Sunday, their major engagement in the Gulf War. Hi, you're on KIT. Thank you for calling.
Hey, I just wanted to tell your guests, Semper Fi, from one Marine to those guys. They did a great job over there.
Well, thank you very much.
You might explain to your listeners out there just what Semper Fi means and what the Marine Corps truly stands for in this country. You guys have a good evening.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Semper Fi is short for Semper Fidelis, which is the Marine Corps' motto. And I think that had a lot to do with the unit's feeling over there was being faithful to our country, being faithful to each other, not letting each other down, by honing our skills and being ready for what was coming.
All right, now you're saying, most people, we were talking about the Reveille engagement, but you were actually in 4 engagements over the period of a couple of days.
That's correct. We were actually in combat for about 2.5 days until we were in Kuwait City by about early on the afternoon of the 3rd day. So the first day we saw a little bit of action going through the minefields. The second morning was the Reveille engagement. That night, late, we set up in another L-shaped ambush for tanks being driven north of 1st Marine Division, who were farther to our east toward the coast. And then the last day, We fought our way into Kuwait City. Not a whole lot of fighting the fourth day. We got up to the 6th Street motorway and were ordered to halt and let the coalition forces symbolically take the city.
Mm-hmm. Now, after the engagement, you started to render aid to surrendering Iraqis. So you went from 1 minute combat mode, 2nd minute support mode, and helped these guys out. What was that like for you?
That was probably one of the times when I've been proudest of Marines that I have had the privilege to serve with, and that was the ability to switch from being a devastating war machine when we are being attacked to being humanitarian and very compassionate. We never let our guard down during this period of time.
Sure.
We still were manning our weapons, but we had Marines offer to assist the corpsmen, the Navy corpsmen, who were treating these Iraqi POWs as they were coming into our lines. And some of these men were very badly wounded, missing arms and legs with severe head injuries. And some of them died before they got to us. But the ones that survived and that made it to our lines all survived and were all repatriated after the war. And the fact that we cared for them as we would have wanted to have been cared for was something that I was extremely proud of at the time.
What's the main thing you brought back from your service in the Gulf War?
Oh gosh, aside from the experience, I mean, it's something that's compacted. We were 5 months, I think, but in those 4 days, it's an eye opener. I think it goes deep down in the core, and it's soul searching, and it's just quite an experience. And I take my hat off to those Vietnam vets and those in the previous World War I, World War II. It's just really difficult to explain, but I can tell you this much: anybody goes through that, it's really quite an experience, and we hope we never have to do it again. And I think of my son now, who is Al Jr., who's in the Marine Corps, and so it just continues. Is he prepared? Is he going to have an experience like this? But all the support that was provided, I tell you, it makes it worthwhile, and it certainly helps while you're going through these types of experiences.
I hate to say it, but gentlemen, we are just about out of time here. Brian Winter is a sheriff's deputy. He's in his domain, I guess you would say, is the Lower Valley. His responsibility is the Lower Valley. He's also a major in the Marine Corps Reserve at Al Piedad Desert Storm that is with the INS. Gentlemen, I really want to thank you for coming in and spending some time with our listeners this afternoon, 10 years after the Gulf War. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and Semper Fi.